The Baltimore Ravens absolutely embarrassed themselves against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 11. We talk about the loss that was filled with mistakes, who's to blame, where the Ravens go from here, and so much more in an instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this sad instant reaction post-game edition of the show, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day and just a part of your day in general, free and available for you. All podcasting platforms that includes in video form on YouTube where you can like and subscribe. Also, follow along in audio form where you can subscribe and follow along there as well. Plus, we got video, audio, same show. You're not missing out on anything regardless. So appreciate all support both in video form and in audio form, however you decide to watch or listen to the show. Today's post-game edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What an embarrassing game. I mean, man, there are so many things we have to talk about. It's just embarrassing. You know, we're sitting here, the Ravens lose 18-16 to the Steelers in a game that was totally winnable. It was totally winnable. But the Ravens' mistakes, sloppiness, penalties, whatever you want to say, this team did it. And it resulted in a loss. Baltimore falls to 7-4. Pittsburgh moves to 8-2. So now, obviously, Pittsburgh has that head-to-head tiebreaker. They're 1-0 in the division, a lot of division games ahead for the Ravens and the Steelers mostly, right? Steelers have 5 left. Ravens have only 2. But we're gonna have to dive into everything here because there's so much to talk about when it just comes to basic football. Basic football. And when you think about this team, when's the last time that the Ravens ended up having a game where they flat out, okay, like a team beat them, right? Steelers made some plays, but the Ravens handed the ball back to Pittsburgh with no points. There were multiple turnovers, multiple boneheaded decisions, just sloppiness all the way around. And you're going to lose games like that. And what we've been saying here on this show, if you're an everydayer, and if you've been listening to me here, I have said time and time again, and it's happened 4 times this year, the Ravens and their mistakes will come back to bite them because they've had games where they've come back and they've won or they've weathered a storm and won. But these losses really make you look in the mirror. But guess what? Wasn't on the defense this time around, in my opinion, right? Hey, Zach Orr's unit stepped up and played ball, where you have the Steelers getting shut out in the red zone. If you listen to our game day episode, we do game day episodes before every single game on Sundays. When you look at the Steelers in the red zone, you look at what happened to them, 0 for 4. That's what I said, right? You limit the Steelers to a kick on every possession, and with this Ravens offense, you win the game every time. Well, I stand corrected, and that's a hand up on me, right? I stand corrected because the Steelers essentially could not get anything going. Russell Wilson has one of the worst turnovers I've ever seen on third down, and then you give the ball right back on a great play, one of the craziest interceptions I've ever seen, you know, from Peyton Wilson. But let's give the defense its credit, Zach Orr his credit, and this is a game with no Marcus Williams and no Eddie Jackson. I don't expect those two to play for the rest of the year unless injuries end up coming back and hurting this team. But this was a physical game. It was, okay, here's how I'll describe this game. It was the most Ravens-Steelers game in Ravens-Steelers games history. It had everything, sloppiness, bad turnovers, bad penalties. Let me read off these penalty stats for you because we're talking about the theme of sloppiness, all right? Ravens, 12 penalties for 80 yards. The Ravens came into this game averaging 8 penalties, which is by far the worst mark in the league this season. And John Harbaugh said after the game, the team was in second and long too much and the penalties were a big problem. Yeah, you know, big problem is kind of an understatement when you're talking about 12 penalties. And look, you have a team that when we talked about keys, I hit all these keys. Look, I'll give myself a double pat on the back here because I put out all these keys and the Ravens did do one really effectively and still lost, and then just terribly did the other one and didn't even make it, right? in second and long situations, like John Harbaugh said there, it's a lot harder to get into your offense. It's a lot harder to do what you want to do. And when you put yourself back in second and 20s, second and 15s, yeah, Lamar can get you out of those positions a lot of the time, but you can't rely on him every single time to do it. And this is what I'll say here. We got Trolls of one here. Refs weren't terrible today. Most of them were legitimate. There were a couple of penalties that were definitely not great calls. But to the point here, yeah, a lot of them were actually like, hey, the Ravens just weren't executing. The Ravens were sloppy, right? Every game has penalties where you can point to the refs. There were certainly times in this game they missed an OPI on George Pickens and this, that, and the other. There were some missed calls on the Ravens too. But even the Steelers had 7 penalties for 45 yards, and the Steelers just found a way to win. I don't know. The Steelers' offense looked atrocious in this game, and that's credit to the Ravens' defense and just a credit to, I think, the Steelers. Their offense was probably playing a little too well. This is more what I would expect from this unit. But, I mean, to me, you have the game in your hands multiple times, and I think what everybody wants to talk about, I see it up and down in the chat right now. First of all, I do want to say that John Harbaugh has no injury updates after the game. He wouldn't comment on Eddie Jackson and wouldn't make the trip and wouldn't comment on Marlon Humphrey heading to the locker room. John Harbaugh, very point blank here after the game. Tuck needs to make kicks. Justin Tucker. We have to have the conversation. We've been having it kind of in a mini sense. You know, he misses a kick here, the Ravens win. It's okay. He misses a kick here. Justin Tucker was a main reason why the Ravens lost this game today. 2-point game, Justin Tucker leaves 6 points on the board. I mean, you do quick math there. If you want to play that game, then yeah, guess what? Justin Tucker is the reason the Ravens lost the game, right? He's the reason. He misses a 47-yarder. He misses a 50-yarder. And then he just drills a 54-yarder for no reason. I mean, of course, out of all the kicks, he makes that one. But Justin Tucker is hooking those balls left. And it's been the same thing over and over. But this is what I've been saying, right? Justin Tucker has to play better. And we had a conversation early in the season. This reminds me back in 2019. We had a conversation. That was my first year doing the show. We had a conversation about 2 players, Tyus Bowser and Tim Williams. Both players are playing poorly, and both players were in danger of getting cut if they didn't get their act together. And first of all, I'm not saying Tucker needs to get cut. I'm using this as an example. Tyus Bowser, next couple weeks, balled out. Tim Williams didn't. Tim Williams got cut. Tyus Bowser went on to have a pretty solid career when it was all said and done. The conversation we had at the beginning of this season was Mark Andrews and Justin Tucker. 2 players who weren't looking like themselves. Tucker was struggling. Andrews wasn't really getting involved in the offense. And we were kind of wondering, well, what is happening? Well, Justin Tucker, his path has been kind of like it's not gotten better. And for Mark Andrews, he's obviously played. And now I do want to see, here it is. It's not, look, Tucker has to make the kicks, but Stout being the holder obviously has drawn a lot of ire, and just the whole special teams unit in general hasn't played. The Ravens special teams unit has been really bad this year. Really bad. From Tucker missing kicks, the punts haven't been great. They've given up decent plays in kick coverage. This used to be a proud special teams unit, and over the last couple of seasons, they really have regressed into, at the very best, a middling unit. So whether you believe it's Justin Tucker, whether you believe it's Jordan Stout, I'm sure we will, see more as the week goes on and watch the replays and this, that, and the other, what is happening, because it really is, he's just hooking those balls to the left. But regardless of who it is, the unit needs to play better. So if it's Tucker, if it's Stout, whoever, they have to, because you're throwing games away at this point, right? You're 7-4 now. The Ravens lost 4 games all last season, one of which was that throwaway game to the Steelers in Week 18. So John Harbaugh, and we'll also talk about the decision to not have Derrick Henry on the 2-point play, which is a very big contention point for me. I personally did not like that whatsoever. But we have to also look at Lamar Jackson here. And again, while I wouldn't necessarily put Lamar at the top of the reasons why the Ravens lost this game, Lamar wasn't great in this game today. I mean, it was probably his worst game of the season, which is something we say far too often when he plays the Steelers. Seems like the Steelers just always have Lamar's number. Now, there were a couple of drops by Ravens receivers, but there are also a couple of plays where Lamar had a couple of overthrows or missed a guy, or there was an underthrow here or there. Lamar finished the game 16-33, 207, 1 touchdown, the 1 interception on just that ridiculous play by Peyton Wilson. And, that Steelers defense, I kind of chalk it up to they have a lot of guys that can do multiple different things in the situation, where multiple defenses need to have multiple guys to figure that out. Well, at the end of the day, the Pittsburgh defense was able to get decent amounts of pressure on Lamar. Derrick Henry wasn't really able to get going in this game. He had 13 carries for 65 yards. Now that's a 5-yard per carry average, but that is very in the look. He had a 31-yard run. And look, here, I'm not saying that it was Lamar's fault they lost the game. If you want to talk about top to bottom reasons why the Ravens lost the game, Lamar's not at the top of that list, right? We can talk about Tucker, penalties, decisions, this, that, and the other. But based off how Lamar's played this season, I would probably call this game the worst game of Lamar's season. So that is what it is. And it's tough because no one was really able to get going on offense for a group that has been so good for really the entire season. We really haven't seen a game like this from the Ravens offense, because usually even when they have bad first halves, they'll be able to at least come back in some way, shape, or form. But it was just like consistently they weren't getting the job done. Lamar ended up calling the 2-point try a quarterback run. He revealed that aspect of the whole thing. So Lamar's saying, look, we can't be beating ourselves in these types of games. We have to fix that. That's the same old story with these Ravens, right? They beat themselves again. They embarrassed themselves again, and the game is littered with mistakes all the way across the board. And Rob here, this is a good point. I mean, I'm not really inspired with confidence here if this Ravens team does make the postseason, because this offense is great usually, but then they disappear in spots like this sometimes, and you're kind of wondering, okay, well, then the defense, the Ravens, they've had a couple games this season where everything is clicking, right? Everything is clicking. But then you have other aspects where, okay, the offense can't do enough, and the defense is trying to play hard like this Pittsburgh game. Then you have other games where the defense can't do anything, and the offense is trying to will this team back to a win. They just need to be a more balanced team with less mistakes. And if you want to talk about penalties, yes, obviously it comes back to everything that we've talked about with protection and sloppiness and penalties and everything that is involved in that. But the team has to play better, but we've been saying that for too long, where even they're just escaping with wins, right? They've escaped twice against the Bengals. They escaped late against the Cowboys that ended up being almost a historic collapse. And it's like, okay, well, hey, guess what? That type of play can bite you. And now this is a 7-4 football team with a huge primetime game against the LA Chargers next week. So we have a lot to dive into, because if this team makes the postseason, and let's say they lose the North, all right? Let's say they get in as the 5 seed. Well, I think you feel decently confident about that matchup, but really, how confident do you feel? I mean, how confident do you feel? So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll dive into how confident we all feel in this Ravens team, and just diving into all the mistakes that the Ravens had, because it wasn't just on Justin Tucker, wasn't just on some of the offensive execution. We'll talk about John Harbaugh a little bit next, so be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to on this instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens, coming to you after a disappointing and embarrassing, really tough loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Stay tuned. First, this show is brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were paying magically skyrockets. With Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. On Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. They mean it. You might have had bad experience before with other mobile providers, such as complicated bills, fees, upcharges, and more. How great is it that Mint Mobile is straight up? Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. Ditch overpriced wireless with Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. Cut wireless bill to $15 a month. Mintmobile.com/LockedOnNFL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower, above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So to get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, your live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We're back, our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you, instant reaction style. Really appreciate everybody for being here, especially after a loss. I know how tough it can be to consume content on the Ravens after they lose and just their favorite sports team in general. I know it's tough for me coming on here and talking about it, but we have to have these conversations. So be sure to like and subscribe in video form on YouTube. Follow along in audio form as well. When we hit 10,000 subscribers, we're close, less than 600 away on YouTube. I'll wear a full Dixie Cup pattern outfit for a week. Said that my first ever show doing this in video form, and I'll stick true to it. So be sure to tell a friend, tell a family member as well if they want 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Now, let's talk about John Harbaugh. Let's talk about the conversation, because a lot of people are talking about that 2-point play where Derrick Henry not even on the field. Did we not have this conversation a couple of weeks ago against the Cleveland Browns? Did we not? Did we not talk about this team not utilizing their players? You need to use your guys when you're in big situations, right? The misdirection stuff. All right, let me lay out a situation for you, okay? You have Derrick Henry and you have Justice Hill. Let's say you and I are playing linebacker for the Steelers, all right? So I'm there and you're there. By the way, if it's us, we're probably losing the rep, just letting you know. But let's just say it's you and I. Would you be more scared, or at least scared of the idea of Derrick Henry or Justice Hill? Derrick Henry or Keaton Mitchell? Derrick Henry or anybody else? You need to have Derrick Henry out there at least just because he's Derrick Henry. We saw a play. It was a quarterback run. I think it was up the middle. Derrick Henry, there was a gravity. I'll try to find the play to put on social media later. But Derrick Henry got the fake. He ran to the right, and people just followed him. People just went with Derrick Henry on the fake, not realizing that Lamar had the ball. And I think Patrick Queen and Minkah Fitzpatrick corrected and got Lamar down after, I think it was a decently chunked game, maybe 10, 12 yards. But at the end of the day, the reason that happens is because teams are more worried about Derrick Henry in a lot of these situations than they are about a Justice Hill or a Keaton Mitchell, because guess what? The guy's Derrick Henry. The guy's Derrick Henry. You have to put your best players out in those key moments of the game, because I get that they wanted to run the QB run, whatever it was, but even if you run Derrick Henry on a play you put him out to the right and you have him run that way, we have seen there. It's not like I'm just talking to talk and that we haven't seen this before. We have seen, even when it's an obvious run with Lamar or a throw, people will follow Derrick Henry because they have to account for him. So to me, even if the play was never designed to go to Derrick Henry, I don't care what it was. Even if it wasn't designed at all, if Derrick Henry was just standing there out wide on the right, you have to have him on the field. I vehemently disagree with John Harbaugh's decision there and Todd Monken and everything that went into that 2-point. It was a terrible call. Remember when Greg Roman was the coordinator of this team? I know people don't really love to remember that, but remember when it was a thing and we would see all those like rollout QB run plays? We said burn that from the playbook, throw it into the abyss, and never use it again. And it just looked like they couldn't decide. Lamar obviously couldn't get anything. The Steelers read the play because they didn't have to focus on anybody but Lamar. Because the thing with Pittsburgh and any other defense is if you want to sell out to stop Lamar, you live if someone else beats you. You live if Lamar makes that throw. I mean, that's the thing. And look, Lamar slices and dices from the pocket. Lamar can slice and dice when he rolls out from the pocket. But the Steelers, as they always did, they had Lamar's number today. They had the Ravens' number today. And it's just situational things where when is this team going to get out of their own way from a play calling perspective, a penalty perspective, or whatever it is. So on a scale of let's play a game here. If you're live with us on YouTube, you can comment it in the live chat. If you're in the comments after the fact on YouTube, be sure to put it below. And if you're listening in audio form, be sure to hit me up on social media and tell me your opinion. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that this Ravens team wins more than one playoff game this year? 1. 1 to 10. One being absolutely not. They're not winning one playoff game, might not even make the playoffs. 10 being, oh yeah, they're winning all their playoff games and they're winning the Super Bowl. One playoff game this season. How confident are you that this Ravens team can win more than one playoff game this year? I know it's tough to ask some of these questions after losses because you're like, oh, of course everybody's going to put that they're not. But even after wins, like a lot of their wins haven't really felt good this year either, right? That's the problem. I see 4s, 5s, a couple of 10s. I like some confidence in here. We got some 0s, a lot of 1s. We got some 8s. Right? I think it's a mixed bag. And look, I don't blame anybody for whatever answer you put because we see the ceiling of this offense and we see how good they can be. But then at the same time, then you end up coming and having games like this where the defense, it's 6 Chris Boswell field goals. Here's what I'll say. If you had told me before the game, Chris Boswell would make 6 field goals and there was no other Steelers scoring in the game, none, I would have said, okay, well, the Ravens won by what? 8, 10, 2 scores? With the way that offense was playing, I would have said, okay, that's exactly what the Ravens defense needed to do against the Steelers team. Don't let them get in the end zone. Just hold them to field goals and punts, and that's your formula. And they just faltered over and over and over again. Here's the other thing I'll talk about situationally as well. Game is just about to go to halftime. Everybody knows where I'm going with this. Game is just about to go to halftime. I don't even remember how many seconds was it. It was less than a minute, I'm pretty sure, right? Less than a minute in the game. I'm going to look it up quickly. I think it was less than a minute before. About 29 seconds to go. 38 was when they got the ball back. And the Ravens decide after Justin Tucker had missed 2 field goals, decided to try to get something going, and they had a short pass left to Isaiah Likely. Likely didn't go out of bounds. He cut back inside, and Patrick Queen rips that ball away and gives the Steelers back the football. You're about to go into halftime up a point, 7-6. And then all of a sudden you face that and you're down 9-7 heading into halftime with Pittsburgh getting the ball back. That's just momentum killer things, right? That's tough. And again, you want to talk about game of inches, game of points. Ravens lost by 2. Chris Boswell, that's a 3-point field goal. And again, I'm just like, why don't you kneel the ball to go to halftime? 38 seconds to go. Your kickers missed 2 field goals. I don't know what, and plus it was a short pass. Like they were really, if Likely cuts it upfield and gets out of bounds, they're probably realistically only getting maximum probably 7 yards, maybe 6, right? So I don't get why you would kind of greenlight that to say, let's go try to see something. Even a deep ball arm punt interception from Lamar would have been like, okay, not great, still would have nailed it, but I get it, right? That's what it is. And I know there's a lot of conversation about this too. David saying penalties are on Harbaugh, poor coaching. Yeah. It is on Harbaugh, and it also is on the players. It's on both because your players, as a player, you have to be more disciplined, right? You have to be more disciplined. But this coaching staff has to get their guys ready for football games better. This is not a one-off, right? This is not a one-off. So at this point, we're talking about a team that came into the game averaging 8 penalties a game. They finished this game with 12. Big penalties on first down. And even there were penalties in situations where the Steelers actually gave the Ravens benefit of the doubt with that. Like when they had that offsides after the Peyton Wilson interception, the Steelers gave it right back. They're like, oh, hey, we'll false start for you. We'll make it even. Yeah, I look, in Wadislav, I never want to hear illegal man downfield ever again. It's the new illegal formation for me. Lamar sometimes, and look, it's really no fault of anybody. It's just kind of the way that it goes. When you're an offensive lineman and it's a screen player, you have a screen option. You obviously want to get your alignment out in front and down the field, but you obviously can't be too far down the field. And sometimes this first screen option isn't there for Lamar, so he will hold the ball for a second to make sure his receiver can work open. But your offensive lineman is already anticipating the ball being out and is already running down the field. So that extra half second or second, that can actually be a detriment and cost your team 5 yards. So it's stuff that they have to practice because not every screen option is going to be available, but you also don't want to lose a step or two as an offensive lineman by not being down the field. That is what it is. So there's so much with this team that needs to be fixed. And, for a team that we were so confident in the offense, no defense can stop this group, put up 40 plus on what was the best defense in the league against Denver. These AFC North games, there's always something weird in the air with them, especially when they play the Steelers, but that's not an excuse. That's not an excuse because the Steelers, despite all of their miscues, found a way to win this game. The Ravens had too many, and they did not do the job. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll keep talking about what's next for this Ravens team because there's a lot of looking in the mirror that they have to do. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll have to get to on this post-game instant reaction edition of Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is the most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor here, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free online courses, including Constitution 101, Introduction to Free Market Economics, and so much more. If you want a course also on the Great American Story, Hillsdale has that for you too. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. We're back, Locked On Ravens, instant reaction edition of the show. Kevin Ostreicher still breaking down that embarrassing effort between the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers. Really, it was just such a sloppy, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad game. Let's just call it that. Appreciate everybody for being here again on the show. It means a lot to me that we have so much support. We're building out great communities, both in audio form and video form as well. And it's tough to talk about losses, but we have to have the conversations, especially when the same issues are just absolutely plaguing this team over and over again. And you know what, Kieran, let's do this. Let's do this. So over on Kevin and Zach React, we do a thing for the Orioles where we do one up, one down, which is essentially one player that you thought played well, one player that you thought did not. So let's do that. If you put in the chat, if you're live, or in the comments, if you're not on YouTube, hit me up on social media if you're in audio form. Who's one player you thought played really well, and who's one player that you thought was a detriment and essentially lost them this game? Kieran's saying that he'd like to shout out Adafe Owe and Adisa Isaac. Dudes came to play. Owe had a hat trick with sacks, and Adisa Isaac had a really, really nice play where essentially Russell Wilson tried to do a trick thing, throw a screen to Darnell Washington. And I just think that, look, we talked about this Ravens pass rush, and I thought that, again, they had a pretty good game against the Steelers offensive line. You had Brandon Stevens get half a sack and Broderick Washington have a sack. Again, 4 sacks, you'll take that, right? You'll take that 1,000%. I see a lot here. Kyle Hamilton and the offensive line is one up, one down. Roquan Smith played well before getting injured. We have here. Here we go. This is a good one. Trey White. Shout out to Trey White, man. And let's talk about this. Brandon Stevens. Let's have the conversation. I'm seeing a lot of Trey White. Not great for Brandon Stevens. Yep, Ardarius Washington played well. Tucker did not. Yep, Brandon Stevens. Let's talk about Brandon Stevens. He's a liability. All right? Had a decently good pass breakup on, was it Calvin Austin? I think it was Calvin Austin, if I'm not mistaken. But he just continuously does not turn his head for the ball. And now, credit to George Pickens on that deep ball because he showed late hands on that play. So Stevens didn't know when the ball was actually coming, but you can tell as a corner, right? When the receiver is tracking the ball, you have to at least either time the play and try to slap even though you don't know when the ball is coming, or turn your head around and see. Sometimes receivers can fake out corners with they're tracking and looking up and there's nothing there. But as you can see, the ball is coming in, and George Pickens doesn't put his hands up until right as the ball is almost in the breadbasket. And that's tough for any corner. But Stevens just is not getting his head around, and that is tough. Where Trey White has 2 incredible pass breakups on George Pickens, and both he was getting physical. That, to me, that's like, oh, that's a guy that might be coming for Brandon Stevens snap, something that I didn't say was going to happen. But, I'll put my hand up again on that one. I could honestly see them putting more Trey White in there. And we'll obviously have to see how the Ravens look at their corner rotation. Obviously, I think their safety rotation is set. Ardarius Washington should not lose that job. Should not lose that job. So for Marcus Williams, I think curtains might be there. Eddie Jackson might get cut tomorrow, if we're being honest. But we'll see. It's just you have the playmakers there. And for Brandon Stevens, if it was 1 bad game, if it was 2 bad games, you can say, okay, let's just ride it out, see what happens. We're past that point. We've honestly been past that point, right? And so Baltimore here is saying, think Steven's playing his way back down to number 3. I mean, I could see that, but then what about Nate Wiggins? Does Nate Wiggins deserve to be the number 4 cornerback on this team? Nate Wiggins has played really well this season for the most part. As a rookie, he's held his own. So does Brandon Stephens become the Ravens' 4th corner? Do they honestly make it a thing? Here's what my prediction will be. If anything, they would probably promote Nate Wiggins to 2. They'd move Trey White and Brandon Stephens into a timeshare at number 3. That's probably what it would be. Because I think that essentially is you have to look yourself in the mirror. Now, was defense the reason this Ravens team lost the game? No, and I'm not trying to pin it on them, right? I'm not saying that the defense lost the Ravens the game. This, honestly, in my opinion, I'm going to go out of my way and call this the best defensive game of the season for the Ravens. And look, there are a lot of others that stats-wise will tell you differently, all right? Stats-wise, that'll tell you different. But in my opinion, this defensive game from Baltimore was their best of the season because of the situation and the way that the Ravens tightened up in the red zone every single time. Pittsburgh was committed to the bit today running that football. They did not give up in terms of being able to get that football and run it. They had 34 attempts for 122 yards in this game. They found some success, more so when Roquan was out of the game. But, I think that, to me, situationally, the Ravens could have folded. The Steelers got into first and goal situations multiple times, and they could have let up a touchdown. And the game looks different, but they come up with timely plays, timely stops, and they did their job of holding the Steelers to a kick on every single possession. This one is on the offense. This one is on the coaching. This one is on the special teams. This one is on the penalties. I'm not putting this game on the defense, and I don't really think anybody should, because we saw too many just missed opportunities and missed mistakes, some of which happened on defense. But we're talking about a different ball game if Justin Tucker makes 1 field goal, if there are maybe 2 less penalties on the Ravens, if there's 1 less turnover, if there's 1 better situationally called play. That's what we're really coming down to with this. And I see Wadislav asking, is it the pass defense finally showed up or the Steelers offense is awful? I'm going to say both. Steelers offense is not good. They were getting a little high up on themselves after the last couple of games, and credit to them. They did a good job in those games. But Russell Wilson was seeing ghosts for the majority of this game, made some plays late, right? Not going to say that they didn't have a perfect game, but I'd say the pass defense did show improvements. I think that they really took a lot of time looking in the mirror after that Thursday night game, and they played a lot better. But we can be honest about things. That's not Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase over there on that Pittsburgh sideline, right? It's Russell Wilson and it's George Pickens. George Pickens is a heck of a receiver, right? I'm not trying to discredit George Pickens, but Jamar Chase is better than George Pickens, and Joe Burrow is light years ahead of what, Russell Wilson can offer the Steelers at this point. So I just think, and look, this is what it comes down to, what we've been talking about, Matthew. If Justin made 1 of those field goals that we win the game, it's inexcusable and sickening. And I think why it makes Ravens fans, myself, everybody more sickened is because it's not a one-off thing. You can chalk up games that happen like this sometimes, and games that sometimes come down to the wire. You have a badly executed game, badly, beaten team that you go through and you just lose the game. But this has been the story all season. The Ravens continuously beat themselves over and over again. There are continuously mistakes that we point to. And now instead of what? Your record is what it says that you are, but we could easily be talking about like a 9-1 football team right now, but they're not. Or maybe I did that math wrong. 9-2. There we go. There's the math. But they're not. The Ravens are what their record says they are. They're a 7-4 football team, and there are a wide amount of outcomes. They could honestly even be a 4-7 football team if we really wanted to get and nitpick everything. So Justin Tucker after the game, Justin Tucker says he remained confident, made an adjustment with his aiming point before his 3rd try. Tucker said he didn't have anything or doesn't see anything to the fact that every kick he missed has missed left. Just, man, brutal stuff all the way around. And this is now a Ravens team that is 1-8 in their last 9 games against the Steelers. I'm of the mindset, and I said this on the pregame episode earlier today, I throw all that out the window. Obviously, there are trends, but it's a year-to-year, game-to-game thing. But that's embarrassing. 1-8 to your biggest division rival in your last 8 games. Some of it has happened when the Ravens have rested their starters and Lamar's been injured, this, that, and the other. But it's not like the Ravens have beaten them with Lamar in there too. So you could kind of see the writing on the wall for this game in a couple of different points. For me, the writing was probably on the wall with that Justice Hill interception. Well, obviously it was Lamar's interception. Peyton Wilson rips the ball away from Justice Hill. That to me was kind of like, okay, Russell Wilson gives you an opportunity to go and score a touchdown, take the lead, and that happens, like that type of play. Ravens and Steelers, those games are always weird. This was the weirdest one of them all. So, look, moving ahead, they have to be better. That's all they can be. But I'm tired of saying that after every loss, and honestly tired of saying that after a lot of these shows here, even after wins, where it's like, oh, they got the win, but there's this, that, and the other that ends up happening. So it's tough all the way around. Ravens fall, and yeah, they now have to bounce back. They need a win now against the Chargers because they now have 4 AFC losses through 11 weeks. We'll see how it all plays out throughout the rest of this week, but man, that's tough, especially when you're vying for seeding in a very tight AFC. Maybe not Kansas City, and we'll see how that game goes, but this was a tough one to swallow for a lot of different people, and I'm sure the Ravens will be kicking themselves in a lot of different situations because a 2-point loss, there are a lot of ways that you could have won this game. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. On the way out, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form on YouTube, and in audio form, be sure to hit that follow along and subscribe button as well. Coming up, we'll be back here tomorrow, 6 a.m., continuing to break down everything from this Ravens and Steelers game, talking about what John Harbaugh had to say, Justin Tucker had to say, Lamar Jackson, and so much more. Stay tuned for all that, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.